The Christmas lights on Maple Street glowed warm and cheerful, but for Olivia Brooks, they only made the night feel colder. She stood on the cracked sidewalk with her worn-out backpack, a fragile, half-torn tote bag, and the sting of humiliation burning behind her eyes. Her breath rose in thin clouds. Her fingers, red from the freezing air, trembled as she held the last pieces of her life. Half an hour ago, her landlord had opened the door with a tight, tired look, the kind of look people use when they've run out of patience and compassion. "I'm sorry, Olivia," he said without a hint of warmth. "I can't wait any longer. Rent's 3 months late. You have to leave tonight. Tonight, Christmas Eve." The words felt harsh, almost unreal. Olivia didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded, swallowed the aching lump in her throat, and packed quietly while the sound of holiday music drifted in from the neighbor's apartment. People were laughing next door, wrapping gifts, cooking dinners, celebrating, while she stuffed her life into 2 bags and stepped out into the bitter wind. Now she stood alone on the sidewalk, the snow falling faster, sticking to her hair, to her lashes. Cars passed by, their warm yellow headlights washing over her for a moment before leaving her in the dark again. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself, but the cold still slipped through like tiny knives. She tried to steady her breathing. "Okay, Liv. Think. Just think." Shelters were full this time of year. Friends? None she could call at midnight. Family? Not an option anymore. For the first time in her life, she felt truly unanchored, like a small boat cut loose in a winter storm. Across the street, she heard a burst of cheerful giggles, holiday excitement, the kind she used to feel as a little girl. Her chest tightened. She wished she could go back to that version of herself, the hopeful one, the one who believed tomorrow would always be brighter. But tonight, tomorrow felt very far away. She looked down the empty street, swallowed hard, and whispered into the cold air, "Where, where am I supposed to go now?" The snow didn't answer. It only kept falling, soft, indifferent, endless, while Olivia tightened her grip on her bags and took her first uncertain step into the night. Snowflakes kept drifting across the street as Olivia began walking, her steps slow, uncertain, almost timid. She kept her head down, hoping no one would notice the girl with the overstuffed bags and nowhere to go. But on the other side of the road, someone did notice her, just not in the way she feared. A black SUV rolled toward the intersection, its headlights cutting through the snowy haze. Inside, Ethan Miller, polished, composed, and quietly exhausted after a long charity gala, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. His mind was on work, on responsibilities, on the never-ending grind that came with being a single father trying to balance everything alone. He saw Olivia for a split second, a shivering, thin figure clutching 2 bags. But he did what so many adults do when life feels overwhelming. He looked away, but his daughter didn't. In the back seat, Emma, 5 years old with bright, innocent eyes, pressed her palms against the cold window. "Daddy, look," she whispered. "She's standing all by herself." Ethan sighed softly. "Sweetheart, it's late. She probably has somewhere to be." Emma didn't buy that. Kids never do. They see the truth without filters, without excuses adults build to protect themselves. "Daddy," she said again, her voice gentle but determined. "She doesn't look like she has a home." Ethan's jaw tightened. He kept driving. And then Emma delivered the words that hit him harder than any business crisis ever had. "Daddy, can you ask Santa to give her a house?" The car grew quiet. Ethan felt something shift, something he didn't want to look at too closely, a tug of guilt, a spark of compassion, a reminder of the man he used to be before life hardened the soft parts of him. He looked into the rearview mirror at his daughter's hopeful face, then back at the lonely girl disappearing in the snow. For the first time that night, Ethan's heart hesitated, and the SUV began to slow down. Ethan didn't understand the feeling rising in his chest. Something restless, something uncomfortable, something he thought he'd buried under years of routine and responsibility. He told himself to keep driving, to focus on getting Emma home safe. That was what a good father did. That was enough. But Emma kept looking out the rear window, her little brows furrowed with pure worry. "Daddy, she's still standing there," she whispered. Ethan exhaled a long, heavy breath. He knew that tone. It was the same gentle stubbornness his late wife used to have, the kind that never let him ignore someone in need. and now it lived inside their daughter. He slowed the SUV to a stop at the corner. Snow tapped softly against the windshield, like it was waiting for him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be tonight. Just check on her, he told himself. Nothing more. He turned the steering wheel, made a cautious U-turn, and drove back toward the faint silhouette in the snow. The closer he got, the more he saw the truth of Emma's innocent observation. Olivia wasn't just cold. She was lost, exhausted, and one breath away from collapsing. Ethan parked a few feet away. His hands lingered on the steering wheel, hesitant, almost afraid of crossing a boundary he couldn't uncross. Helping strangers wasn't something he did anymore. Life had made him practical, guarded, a little colder than he liked to admit. But then Emma leaned forward between the seats and whispered, "Daddy, please don't let her stay out here alone." That single, vulnerable 5-year-old plea melted what little resistance he had left. Ethan stepped out into the freezing air. His shoes crunched on the snow as he approached Olivia slowly, carefully, not wanting to frighten her. She didn't even notice him at first. She was hugging her arms, trembling so hard it looked painful. Ma'am," Ethan said gently, Are you okay out here?" Olivia looked up, startled. Her eyes red, tired, and shining with the kind of quiet despair people try to hide. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The snow fell between them, soft and cold. And something like fate finally brought their worlds together. Olivia blinked against the falling snow, unsure if the man standing in front of her was real or just another trick of exhaustion. Her voice came out shaky and timid, barely louder than the wind. I'm fine, really. Just figuring things out." Ethan could see immediately that she was not fine. Her cheeks were bright red from the cold, her lips trembling, her hands wrapped around her arms like she was holding herself together. He felt a small tug in his chest, something compassionate, something deeply human. Before he could respond, the SUV door swung open and little Emma jumped out, bundled in her puffy pink coat. "Hi," she chirped, waving energetically. "I saw you from the car." Olivia stared, stunned. The little girl's bright smile hit her harder than the cold air. Kids had a way of seeing straight through the armor adults wore. Emma stepped closer, her boots crunching in the snow. "You don't have a hat," she said with genuine concern. "Your hair has snow on it." Olivia let out a soft, embarrassed laugh. "Yeah, I guess it does." Ethan hurried over, gently placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Sweetheart, stay close to me. It's freezing." But Emma didn't look away from Olivia. "Daddy," she said in her small, earnest voice, "can we help her? Santa would want us to." Olivia's chest tightened, the unexpected kindness catching her completely off guard. She tried to speak, tried to reassure them that she didn't need anything, but the words tangled up inside her. "I'm okay, really," she whispered, though her voice betrayed a weary, fragile truth. Ethan met her eyes then, really looked at her. There was no judgment in his gaze, just quiet concern. "Look," he said softly, "we're not here to pry, but it's too cold for anyone to be out here alone. Can we at least get you somewhere warm for a bit? Just a cup of coffee?" Olivia hesitated, snowflakes settling on her lashes. No one had offered her warmth in a very, very long time. And for the first time tonight, she considered saying yes. Olivia hesitated longer than she meant to. Trust didn't come easy anymore. Life had chipped away at it piece by piece. But the cold bit harder with each passing second, and Emma's warm-hearted, hopeful eyes made it impossible to refuse. Okay," Olivia finally whispered. "Just for a little while." Ethan nodded, relieved but cautious, as if afraid she might change her mind. He opened the back door of the SUV, brushing snow off the seat. "Here, you can sit next to Emma. She'll keep you company." Emma immediately scooted over, patting the seat beside her with an excited grin. "You can hold my stuffed bunny," she announced proudly. "She's very soft and she helps when people are sad." Olivia felt her throat tighten. The gesture was so innocent, so pure, it nearly unraveled her. She slid into the warm car, letting the heat thaw her fingers. For the first time that night, she breathed without shivering. Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his tone gentle. "There's a diner a few blocks away. It's open late. They make decent coffee and amazing blueberry pie." Emma nodded vigorously. "And hot cocoa, extra marshmallows." Despite everything, Olivia let out a small laugh. Quiet, fragile, but real. "That sounds nice." The SUV rolled through the snowy streets, passing glowing yard decorations, inflatable Santas, and houses packed with warmth she didn't have. Olivia tried to shrink into her seat, feeling awkward, out of place, but Emma kept leaning against her, humming a Christmas melody under her breath. When they finally pulled up to the diner, its neon sign flickering against the frosted windows, Olivia felt a wave of nerves wash over her. Ethan stepped out and opened the door for her. Polite, respectful, not pushy. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you warm." Olivia looked at him, then at Emma, then at the glowing diner. Maybe warmth didn't always come in the way she expected. Maybe tonight, kindness had found her first. The diner smelled like fresh coffee, buttered toast, and nostalgia. The kind of place where truckers, night shift nurses, and small-town families all cross paths. Olivia stepped inside timidly, her worn-out sneakers leaving little puddles of melted snow on the floor. The warmth hit her instantly, wrapping around her like a gentle, much-needed hug. Ethan held the door for Emma, then for Olivia. He didn't hover, didn't act like a hero, didn't push. He simply guided them toward a booth near the window, the one lit by a soft amber glow from an old lamp. Emma bounced into her seat, swinging her feet. "Daddy, can I get cocoa with the marshmallows shaped like stars?" Ethan smiled faintly, tired but fond. "Yes, sweetheart. 2 cocos. One for our guest, too." Olivia blinked, startled. "Oh, I don't need—" Emma reached across the table, placing her tiny hand on Olivia's. "But you're cold," she said in the most matter-of-fact voice. "Hot cocoa fixes cold feelings." A knot formed in Olivia's throat. She'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone, anyone, care in such a simple, pure, instinctive way. The waitress came by with menus, giving Ethan a knowing, teasing look. "Late night, huh? Need something warm?" Ethan nodded. "Coffee for me, and whatever she wants." He tilted his head toward Olivia, who clutched the laminated menu like it might disappear if she let go. "Anything is fine," Olivia murmured. "Really?" But Emma shook her head firmly. "No, you have to pick something yummy. That's a rule." Despite her nerves, Olivia let out a soft laugh. Vulnerable, grateful, almost surprised by the sound. As the orders were placed, Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, careful. "You don't have to tell us anything. Just sit. Warm up. That's all." Olivia looked down at her trembling hands, then at the steaming cocoa the waitress set in front of her. The whipped cream swirled like a little snowy mountain. When she wrapped her fingers around the cup, the heat sank deep into her bones, comforting, steady, grounding. And for the first time that night, Olivia didn't feel like a burden. She felt human again. For a few minutes, the booth was filled with nothing but quiet sounds. Emma humming softly as she colored on a napkin, the clink of silverware, the hiss of the espresso machine. Olivia kept her hands wrapped around the cocoa, letting the heat settle into her like warmth she hadn't felt in days. Ethan studied her cautiously, not with judgment, but with a gentle, concerned curiosity. She looked like someone carrying a weight too heavy for one person. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You don't have to share anything," he repeated softly. "But if you want to, we're here." Olivia hesitated. Talking about her situation always made her feel exposed, shaky, and ashamed. But something about the amber diner lights, the steady warmth of the cocoa, and the innocent safety of Emma's presence made her braver than usual. She took a slow breath. "I lost my job 2 months ago," she began, voice trembling, "and I couldn't keep up with rent. I tried picking up part-time work, cleaning houses, babysitting, anything, but it wasn't enough." Ethan listened without interrupting. "My landlord gave me warnings. I just didn't have anywhere else to go." She blinked fast, swallowing hard. "I thought I could figure something out before he kicked me out. But tonight," her voice cracked, vulnerable and raw. "Tonight I ran out of time." Emma paused her drawing and scooted closer, resting her tiny hand on Olivia's arm. "It's okay," Emma whispered softly. "Sometimes people just need help. Daddy says that." Ethan's breath hitched just slightly. He hadn't said that in years, not since before life made him cautious and guarded. But hearing Emma repeat those words now felt like a reminder of who he used to be. Olivia wiped a tear quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to—" "You don't have to apologize," Ethan said firmly, but gently. "You're allowed to be honest." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. No pity, just truth. It made her chest ache in a strangely relieving way. And in that moment, in a little diner glowing with Christmas lights, something shifted. 3 strangers began to feel a little less like strangers. The waitress brought their meals, warm blueberry pie for Emma, a grilled cheese for Olivia, and black coffee for Ethan. For a moment, everything felt strangely normal, like three people simply sharing a late-night bite instead of sitting on the fault line of someone's life falling apart. Ethan watched Olivia quietly as she took her first small bite. The way her shoulders relaxed just a little, the way her eyes softened. He realized this might be the first real food she'd had all day, maybe longer. That thought hit him harder than expected. "Do you have anywhere to stay tonight?" he finally asked, voice careful, not wanting to sound pushy. Olivia froze, her fork hovering midair. After a long beat, she shook her head. "No, the shelters are full. I checked earlier." Her honesty was vulnerable, and it tugged at Ethan in a way he hadn't felt in years. Emma looked up with blueberry on her cheek. "She can stay with us, Daddy," she announced cheerfully. "We have a guest room and extra blankets." Olivia nearly choked on her breath. "Oh, no, no, sweetie. That's very kind. But I couldn't." Ethan quickly placed a comforting hand on Emma's back. "Honey, we can't just invite people without asking." Emma frowned. "But Daddy, she's cold." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. This kid had a talent for breaking down every emotional wall he'd built since becoming a single father. And she wasn't wrong. He looked at Olivia again. Really looked. The exhaustion on her face. The way she held herself like she was bracing for the world to keep hurting her. The quiet strength under all that fear. "Listen," Ethan said gently. "I'm not asking you to stay at our house, but there's a small motel 2 blocks from here. Clean, safe. I can cover a night or two until you get back on your feet." Olivia shook her head instantly. I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's a warm room," Ethan replied softly. "That's all it has to be. No strings." Olivia looked down at her trembling hands. Kindness was the one thing she didn't know how to receive. Not anymore. Olivia sat frozen in the booth, staring at her hands as if they might give her the answer she needed. The offer sounded simple, just a warm room for a night. But to someone who'd spent months feeling unwanted, invisible, and alone, it felt overwhelming. "I really don't want to be a burden," she murmured. Her voice was small, fragile, like she was afraid it would break halfway through the sentence. Ethan leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. His expression softened, steady, almost protective. "You're not a burden," he said quietly. "You just had a bad night. Everyone has them. Let someone help this time." Olivia shook her head weakly. "People don't help like this." Emma chimed in before her dad could answer. "We do," she said proudly, as if it was the most obvious truth in the world. That simple, innocent certainty disarmed Olivia more than anything Ethan could have said. She felt her throat tighten again, not from sadness this time, but from the unfamiliar sting of hope. Ethan stood, placing a few bills on the table for the check. "Come on," he said gently. "It's late. The cold's only getting worse." Outside, the wind had picked up, sending sharp gusts of snow swirling around them. Olivia pulled her coat tighter, but the icy air still cut through layers. Ethan walked a little closer, not touching, not crowding, just close enough to make her feel safer. When they reached the motel, the neon sign buzzed softly above the entrance, casting a pink hue across the snow. Ethan stepped inside first, speaking quietly to the older woman at the front desk. Money exchanged hands discreetly, no questions asked, no attention drawn to Olivia. He stepped back outside and handed her the room key. "Here," he said. "It's yours for the night." Olivia stared at the key resting in his palm. Something so small, yet it felt like more mercy than she'd received all year. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Really?" Ethan nodded, offering a gentle, sincere half-smile. "You're safe tonight. That's what matters." Olivia stepped into the small motel room and paused. It wasn't fancy, just 2 clean beds, a humming heater, and a nightstand with a lamp shaped like a little cabin. But to her, it felt like stepping into another world. A world where she wasn't freezing. A world where she wasn't looking over her shoulder. A world where she could breathe. Ethan waited at the door, not crossing the threshold, giving her space. "If you need anything, the front desk is right downstairs," he said softly, "and my number's on the paper inside your bag. Just in case." Olivia clutched the strap of her backpack, overwhelmed by the kindness. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied, his voice gentle and steady. "Just rest." Emma peeked from behind her father's legs, waving enthusiastically. "Good night, Miss Olivia. Don't forget to drink water. Daddy says it helps when you're sad. Olivia laughed, quiet, a little teary. I'll remember. When they left, the room fell into a calm, almost sacred quiet. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers along the warm blanket. She hadn't felt this kind of comfort in months. Simple, safe, no strings attached. She kicked off her shoes, realizing her socks were damp, and set them by the heater. Her body ached with exhaustion, the raw, heavy kind that settles into bones. But for the first time, she was allowed to feel tired instead of scared. On the nightstand, she found a paper cup filled with tea bags, a small pack of tissues, and a folded note. Ethan's handwriting was neat, careful. For a warmer night, her breath caught. People didn't do things like this. Not for her, not anymore. Olivia lay back on the pillow, letting the heat soothe her sore muscles, and closed her eyes. Outside, snow continued falling, soft and relentless. But inside this tiny room, the world felt still, like someone had hit pause on the chaos. For the first time in a long while, she whispered a quiet, honest truth into the dim light. I feel safe. Morning sunlight crept through the thin motel curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Olivia stirred slowly, feeling warm for the first time in weeks. For a disorienting second, she forgot where she was, until she saw the heater glowing in the corner and remembered the unexpected, gentle kindness that brought her here. She sat up, brushing hair from her face, embarrassed at how deeply she'd slept. Her body felt heavy but rested, like the exhaustion had finally loosened its grip. A soft knock sounded on the door. Olivia stiffened. Who is it? It's just us, Ethan's calm voice replied. Wanted to check in before we head out for the morning. When she opened the door, Emma stood there holding a small paper bag decorated with childish snowflakes. This is for you, she announced proudly. It's a muffin. I picked blueberry because it's happy. Olivia's heart melted. Thank you, sweetheart. Ethan stepped forward slightly, keeping a respectful distance. We didn't want to bother you. Just thought you might want breakfast. His tone was steady, but there was something conflicted behind his eyes, like he was trying to balance doing the right thing without overstepping. Olivia hugged the bag close. You two have done more than enough. I still don't really understand why. Ethan hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. Because everyone deserves a soft landing once in a while, and because my daughter has a better moral compass than I do. Emma nodded proudly, as if confirming the statement. Olivia laughed, a small, vulnerable, grateful sound. Well, thank you, truly. Ethan shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. Listen, I don't want to pressure you, but if you need time to search for work or make a plan, I can cover another night here, just until you get steady. Olivia's breath caught. The offer was kind, painfully kind. My whole life I've learned not to rely on anyone, she admitted softly. It's strange letting myself accept this. Ethan met her eyes, sincere and warm. Maybe that's exactly why you should. Olivia blinked hard, overwhelmed. Kindness didn't just warm her room last night. It was beginning to warm something in her she thought was gone. The next evening, the snow returned, soft, steady, painting the sidewalks in a fresh blanket of white. Olivia stood outside the motel room, hugging her borrowed winter coat a little tighter. She wasn't cold this time. Not really. Something inside her felt hopeful, almost courageous, in a way she hadn't felt in months. She saw Ethan's SUV pull up slowly. The headlights cast a warm glow across the snow, and then Emma tumbled out of the back seat with the jittery excitement only a 5-year-old could carry. Miss Olivia, she squealed, running toward her with tiny boots crunching in the snow. Daddy said we're going somewhere special. Olivia crouched down, smiling despite the lump in her throat. Oh yeah? Where's that? Emma grinned proudly. To see the Christmas lights downtown, and Daddy said you can come if you want. Olivia looked up at Ethan. He stood by the car, hands in his pockets, expression soft but careful, not assuming, not demanding, just inviting. You don't have to, he said quietly, but we'd really like it if you did. Something tender unfolded in Olivia's chest. She'd spent so long feeling invisible that being wanted, truly wanted, felt almost unreal. She took a slow breath and nodded. I'd love to. Downtown glowed with twinkling lights wrapped around lampposts, storefronts, and the big Christmas tree in the square. Families snapped photos, kids laughed, couples held hands. But for Olivia, the moment felt almost magical, like stepping into a life she once thought she'd lost forever. Emma held Olivia's hand the whole time, chattering about Santa, snowflakes, and her dream of having a puppy. Ethan walked beside them, occasionally glancing over with a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. As they reached the tree, Emma tugged Olivia's sleeve. "Guess what?" she whispered. "I asked Santa for something." Olivia laughed softly. "Oh yeah? What did you ask for?" Emma looked up with those bright, honest eyes. "A home for you, so you don't have to be sad anymore." The breath escaped Olivia's lungs. She blinked hard, eyes stinging. She looked at Ethan, startled, searching his face. He stepped closer, slowly, gently, giving her time to breathe. "Emma's not the only one who wants that for you," he said quietly. "You don't have to decide anything tonight. But if you want help getting steady, if you want a place to start again, we're right here." It was the first time Olivia didn't feel small in front of kindness. She felt safe, wanted, seen. Her voice trembled, but in a warm, steadfast way. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me when no one else did." Ethan offered a tender smile. "Everyone deserves to be seen." Together, the three of them stood beneath the giant tree, the lights glowing above like a gentle promise. Not a perfect family, not a perfect future, but a beginning, the kind that warms the fragile parts of you. If this happened on a cold Christmas night, would you stop to help someone who needed you? Or would you drive past like nothing was wrong? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow our channel for more emotional, heartwarming stories like this. Your support helps us create more moments that remind us kindness still matters, hope still exists, and no one should face the cold alone. Thank you for watching, and keep your heart warm.